Welcome to the Arete Podcast. My name is Richard Triggs, and today I'm joined by Brad Church, Chief Executive and Senior Advisor at Goodman Private Wealth. In this episode, we'll discuss wealth, values, wellbeing, and what it really means to build a successful life. Brad shares why financial advice should begin with understanding what money actually means to someone, not simply with investments or products. We'll also explore his philosophy of well-being, the role of philanthropy, how Goodman hires for values fit, and what it takes to build a workplace people genuinely want to be part of. It's a thoughtful and practical conversation about money, meaning, leadership, and consistency. So sit back and enjoy my conversation with Brad Church. Well, Brad, welcome to the Arete Podcast. I know we've been talking about this for a few months since we first met through Vistage.
Yes, well, thank you for having me, Richard. Great to be here finally.
So for those who are unfamiliar, Vistage is a sort of a mentoring / collegiate group of business owners and CEOs, and we get together once a month and share some of our trials and tribulations and look for advice from each other. And Brad, you and I met through that experience. I think you'd been in Vistage for over 20 years.
Yeah, it's a great learning process, and clearly I'm a slow learner. I've been there since 2004, so yeah, more than 20 years.
Right, and so we might come back to a little bit that in a bit more detail later, but firstly, why don't you just tell us about your professional responsibilities? What are you up to at the moment?
Well, in my day job, I'm the Chief Executive and a Senior Advisor at Goodman Private Wealth. So Goodman Private Wealth, small firm, privately owned, and serves a small community of financially successful individuals and families who are based around South East Queensland.
Okay. And you've been with that organisation a long time, haven't you?
Yeah, something you'll learn about me is I'm very stable and loyal. Some might say boring, but yes, I've been here at Goodman Private Wealth for 28 years.
Wow, okay. And give us a sense of the size of the business now. What sort of headcount and, how many clients you're working with and so on.
Yeah, small firm by design, because that way we can work closely, spend a lot of time and do a really great job. So it depends how you measure the number of employees, but we've got 12 employed directly. When you take into account a handful of external experts, we're a team of about 18. And we serve a community of individuals and families, so total households equal about 120.
Okay. And joining them way back in 1998, what did it look like back then?
Different.
I'm sure.
I believe it or not, Richard, I have the track record of only ever attending one job interview. And fortunately, I got that job and I'm still here today. Back then, I was joining a team of two. John Goodman founded this business, having been a successful chartered accountant.
Mm-hmm.
And he was well supported by another lady, Geraldine Simpson. And so back then, I was the third person on the team.
Right.
So smaller community of clients. What we did back then, still worked with financially successful families, but the service offering was a lot more narrow. It was primarily investment advice. John Goodman had a knack, and in the end, a great track record of managing portfolios. So I suppose the big difference since then is not just the fact that we've grown in terms of size and grown in terms of the number of families we look after, but what we do today is far more comprehensive.
Right. And so looking at your org chart on your website, I imagine James is related to John, but John's no longer in the business.
Yes, that's true. James is John's son, so this is it's a second generation family business. I'm obviously the non-family member, but a bit like the adopted son.
Right, fair enough. And had you had any kind of prior, professional career to joining, or was this kind of a straight out of university type job?
Straight out of uni, actually. I mean, while I was at uni, I sort of cut my teeth in my dad's small business, so part-time role there doing basically company accounting, inventory control. But then, as I said, out of the careers department at QUT,
Right.
applied for one job, attended one interview, and was successful. So you can be lucky sometimes.
You're a rare beast, that's for sure. But I'm not sure what average professional tenure is now, but certainly pre-COVID, people to stay in a job for 3 years was quite a stretch, let alone as long as you have. And so what were some of the key milestones over that period, with Goodman, when you look back on?
Yeah, I mean, it's a long time. I can think of many. When I joined, John was just starting to turn his mind to his own succession planning. So for that next phase, really up until then, first 10 years of the business, you could say one-man band. From then, it was about building a real team. And we went through a fabulous journey of, simple things, just like documenting processes, establishing a strategic planning cadence that was annual and that we've been doing ever since, bringing in external consultants to help improve the quality of what we're doing, to start working on the culture of the business. So the next 10 years was sort of about succession planning, and the outcome of that was that John, James and I went through a succession plan where we handed over the day-to-day runnings of the business. And I suppose a key learning from that, just to share it if I may, a lot of people talk about succession planning in business, but something that I recall we discovered in that process was that there was actually 3 different and distinct succession plans that we had to execute well. One was the management plan. So that was where John actually handed over to me as chief executive. One was the client plan. So John was the principal advisor and he had to successfully transition those client relationships to James and me, who became advisors. And then the third thing was the ownership plan, where John, previously owning the business, has sold to James and I, who are now 50-50 shareholders. And each of those had different plans, they had different time frames, they had different actions that were required to do it successfully. So from there, the next period was really about James and I making it our own, and we set the vision of staying small, preserving John's values, preserving the successful investment philosophy, but just trying to grow the breadth and depth of what we did so that we could increase our impact on our clients and our community.
Okay, great. And what about from a personal point of view? I mean, many people who are listening to this podcast are aspiring CEOs or aspiring business owners and really want to sort of learn from those who have walked the path before them. In terms of your own professional development, we can touch on Vistage a little bit more if you'd like to, but how have you sort of developed out your career strengths as a CEO over that period? Have you taken a sort of quite planned approach to that, or has it just happened as you've gone along?
I think it's probably become increasingly more planned, and that's something that I have found helps me and helps my clients sort of translate action into success. So these days more planned, but back in the early days, it was a bit of a baptism of fire. In terms of my development, I've never stopped being curious. So I think that's really been the little flame that just has kept me learning and growing and developing. And early on, as I've said, I've been in this business for 28 years. I've been in Vistage for 22. So around the time we began those succession plans and I got handed the opportunity to be chief executive, I joined Vistage. Now, Vistage is a peer group. The value of that was I was able to step into a round table of peers who were far more experienced than I was, a bit more grey hair around the table, and they were able to be my advisory group. So I had access to knowledge that, like maybe I've got a bit of that now for myself, but back then, what a fabulous way to get instant access to a far more experienced and capable team of leaders.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I was listening to a podcast just yesterday with the founder and CEO of Perplexity, which is an AI, competitor to Claude and ChatGPT and so on. And he was talking about the greatest value that you can have as a leader in business or in any endeavor is curiosity. And that was the exact word you used. I've always been curious. So how do you fan the flames of curiosity for yourself?
I don't know. I think it feeds off itself, to be honest. These days it's actually, I have a well-being philosophy, and it's an important part of, I believe, the inner and emotional health aspect. So I have my reasons why I believe it's important, but actually, why do I do it? It's interesting. It's intrinsic. I don't know. It's a difficult one. It's something that I can't stop doing.
Yeah, it's an innate quality.
Yeah, yeah. I think it has been developed a little bit over the years, and I think the more this is probably a good lesson for me was the more you learn, the more you realise you have left to learn. And so, you start the process, and then you just have a hunger for more learning and more curiosity.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's true. I also think that there comes a point, certainly for me, where you realize that there is so much to learn and so many things to be curious about that for me, I've kind of had to do the reverse, which is to rein that in a little bit and stick to my knitting rather than go out chasing shiny new toys all the time. I read a great business quote recently, and they said, "Success is boring." And success is doing the boring stuff consistently well. And for my personality type, that has been a big lesson to learn.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And yeah, success is boring. I sometimes reflect on my journey and think it's been a bit boring because it's been so stable. But I mentioned my well-being philosophy. When I am curious these days, I try to be intentional about what areas in life I'm exploring, and it's usually one of the 8 areas of well-being.
Right. Well, that's one of the things before we started recording you mentioned is this sort of idea of well-being versus work-life balance, and part of that's obviously something that you've taken on board for yourself, but also with your clients. So perhaps explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, look, I've been very fortunate. John Goodman started a business here working with successful individuals and families, and I've now had the opportunity to work closely with them for 28 years. So, you kind of expect in a private wealth business that I might have learnt a little bit about money in that time, and I have. But I think the surprise to me has been that I've also learnt a lot about the other aspects to life, and I've been able to observe how different people, although they might be successful in one aspect, may or may not be successful in other aspects. So over time, I used to subscribe to the philosophy of work-life balance. I've struggled with it. And over time, I've realized that maybe that philosophy was fundamentally flawed. When you think about it, we've got just 2 things we're supposed to be working on. One is work, and the other is everything else, which is wrapped up into life. And if you think about the concept, somehow we're supposed to reach this magic position of equilibrium. And then when you get there, then what? Does it just stay in equilibrium forever? It just, to me, in the real world, that's not how it works. So when I did the work and looked at what was working amongst all of those people I knew and met along the way, I developed a philosophy called wellbeing. It is a bit different in that there are 8 areas that we need to be focused on, not 2. Rather than achieving this magic equilibrium, the idea is to set goals in and make progress in the 8 areas of well-being. And in the real world, sometimes you have setbacks, in which case you just reset, set a new goal to move forward and go again. So the 8 areas of well-being, I don't think these days will surprise anyone, but I'll share them. It's physical health. Separate and distinct from that, it's inner and emotional health. It's the environmental aspect. Now, by that, I don't mean saving the trees. I mean the environments where we spend our time, the environments where we belong. There is the generosity aspect. There is the recreation aspect. I think as business people, we need to remind ourselves that sometimes it's okay to have fun. There is the relationship aspect, of course, the business and career aspect, and last but not least, the financial aspect. So to me, the idea of well-being is that we're not working towards work-life balance, but rather we're working towards a state of health. happiness and prosperity.
Yeah, look, I agree with you completely. In fact, I use a similar frame. Mine has 6 versus 8. But even in just thinking about purely from that work-life balance perspective, one of the things I learned very early on as a recruiter, is that work-life balance has this kind of implicit sort of expectation that work and non-work are equally balanced. But you look at somebody like Elon Musk, who may love working 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and is totally happy, where versus another person who might be a new mum, who really wants to put her attention on her family. And so I kind of change it from work-life balance to work-life flexibility. You need to have flexibility. And there will be times in your career where you will want to work much greater hours or have much greater responsibility, and other times where perhaps that's not your highest priority. And I know, from talking to you outside of this, you're starting to think about your own work-life flexibility. But let's talk about, your clients. So I imagine that when a client is coming to meet with you, something's gone on for them, there's been an event, or they're at a certain point in their life. So when that person's walking in to sit down with you and start this process of unpacking and understanding where they're at, what are the kind of things that you focus on?
Yeah, you're spot on, Richard. So when somebody reaches out to me, there's usually a reason that's driven them to make the contact. And it's often that there's a specific financial issue in their life that they need to solve, or it might be a specific financial event that is imminent. So they reach out, and usually their line of inquiry is, "Hey, Brad, I've been referred to you. Can you help me solve this problem? Or can you help me through this event?" However, that's not exactly how the first meeting goes. So in the first meeting, we reframe, we step back up to a higher level, and we think bigger picture. We think more strategically. And I like to introduce people to a process called the financial roadmap. I'll explain this process really simply. The first part of a financial roadmap is to take the time to work through a values discovery process, just articulate what's important about money to you. And if there's a couple that I'm working with, we'll do that for each of them. Once we've got clarity about what's important, then we work on identifying and detailing the family goals, financial goals. Last but not least, we work through all of their financial documents and we document where they are now financially. And so with that financial roadmap, you get a great perspective of where they are now, what they're working towards, and their reasons why, what's important to them. It's not until we have that clarity and that sort of big picture perspective that we are then in a position to start diving down into the specific events or issues and creating a plan to solve for them.
And so these tools that you use, the roadmap and also your 8 factors in terms of wellbeing and so on, are they tools that you've developed yourself over time, or are they things that you've learnt and then repurposed to implement in your own business?
The wellbeing philosophy was something that I created myself. To be honest, Richard, when I first came up with it, I thought I was a genius. And then you start to look outward and discover that there's already quite a few of these models around and have been for years. So that one is something I've created for myself. The financial roadmap tool was actually a tool that we discovered in the United States. So, in our business here, we've invested a fair bit of time and money to go looking for world's best practice. The financial roadmap tool is one of those tools that we've brought in and used in an Australian context.
Okay, and so perhaps give me a couple of examples of where perhaps an individual or a couple have come in to meet with you and they've had this particular event or something's happening, and then by going through this roadmap principle, they've had this sort of awareness that maybe it's a much bigger picture to consider. And I know that you again mentioned it's about fitting the right pieces together to construct the puzzle.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, often they come in for this one event or one issue, and I highlight that issue or event is just one piece in a much bigger puzzle. And my role is to help them put together the whole puzzle and give them a full picture. Let me give you two examples. So let's think about this financial roadmap process. I mentioned that one of the steps is to benchmark where they are now financially. And to do that, we ask for all of their important financial documents. Now, that exercise in itself is almost always very revealing. It highlights how well organised their financial documents are, how well or how quickly accessible those documents are. For the busy business person, sometimes they have some of the documents, and other times maybe their existing professionals like their lawyer or accountant might be where key documents are stored. And so just that exercise in itself will highlight to them and to us that there's some work to do just to get the records organised and complete. And once that's highlighted, well, then, we might have a role to play in helping them get organised and stay organised. So that's one example. Another one then is that once we've identified all of their individual goals, often that puts the issue or event in context. And sometimes it highlights that issue or event may not be the most important thing. And so, in the context of goals and what's important to them, we're actually able to reprioritize things. So that doesn't mean we don't solve the problem they came to see me about. It just highlights that we then have to go through a prioritization process to work through each thing and event in the order of what's important.
As you're telling that story, I'm smiling because my mum is 85 and I'm her enduring power of attorney and also the executor of her will. So I went around to her house at Christmas time and said, well, I better have a look at, your financials. And she pulls out this drawer that's just stuffed with old receipts and so like literally nothing at all. So I bought this book online, which is something like a particularly dying book, and it literally steps through every single thing, and you have to write in the insurances and the bank accounts, and I imagine there must be so many people in that situation.
Almost everyone. Yeah, almost everyone. And there's the people we work with are intelligent people, they're successful people, and they're actually very capable. So this is usually not a question of intelligence or capability. It's just a question of being time poor. And in our busy lives, where it's often split between work and family and health and maybe a few other things, so often organising the financial documents is a distant priority.
Yeah, and I imagine too, there are a lot of people who perhaps are very successful in business. They've built great companies, they're very profitable businesses, they're very sustainable businesses, and yet that other side of their life or the other factors in their life are not necessarily in disarray, but because they haven't had that prioritization, there is a real imbalance there. And so how do you work with people to perhaps translate their business success into personal and financial success?
Well, I think the answer is pretty simple, actually. It's just giving that area in their life the attention, the time, and the expertise it requires. So, what often occurs then is once they've realised the gap and they choose to employ someone like me and my team, we allocate our time and expertise and resources to getting that area of their life in order. And that can be fabulous for a couple of reasons. One, it solves the problem. But two, I don't know about you, Richard, but when you have these gaps in your life, you do know about them. They're there subconsciously. And getting that resolved can actually free you up to then be more present in the other areas in life that you want to be spending your time on, and freeing you up to be sort of released to do better work in the business. So I think that the answer is pretty simple. You've just got to allocate the resources, and either you make a choice for that to be done by you, or maybe it's a decision to get one of your existing professionals, like your accountant, to explicitly step into that area and do the work, or you hire an additional person on the team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, I completely appreciate that, and it's similar to you know that you need to improve your health, but you know that you don't have the discipline to go and motivate yourself every day in the gym and so on, get a personal trainer or a dietitian
Exactly.
and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and look, one of the things also, Brad, from spending, a day a month with you for many, many months now, you're a very values-led. And so you talk to me about your philosophy around being values-led and how that translates into, how you're running Goodman and how you're working with your clients.
Yeah, well, I mentioned earlier that when somebody comes in to see me for the first time and we go through that financial roadmap process, the first stage in that process is to have a values conversation. So quite literally, they're coming in here, meeting me for the first time, and the first conversation is not how's your day, how about the weather outside, what'd you get up to on the weekend. My first question is, what's important about money to you?
Mm.
And we go deeper on that. We explore that. So values are a funny thing, especially when I'm talking to successful business owners, because when I ask somebody what are values, so often we think about the poster on the wall in our office where we've got those so-called value statements that get pulled out and dusted off every once in a while. And sometimes they have more of a marketing bent than a cultural bent, if you know what I mean. Whereas when I'm working with individuals and families, I think they take on a different significance. So to me, values are our beliefs about what's important to us. We all have them. They've been shaped over many years and through many experiences. Because we all have values, so because we all have beliefs about what's important to us, they're actually shaping our decisions every day. And so I sort of look at it and go, well, you can be ignorant about your values and not be aware that they're influencing your decisions, or you can go the other way and take the time to discover and clarify your values, record them, be aware of them, and then have ability to take control and make better decisions about the things that matter. So in my world, that means making the best decisions about your money.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we take the time with our clients. And taking that further, once you've embraced this approach, it's very hard not to take it on personally and not to take it on in the business. So, we're values led in terms of the way we guide our clients towards their goals, but equally we're a values oriented business. And, James and I, the owners here, are clear about our values, which drives our purpose, which drives our vision, and which drives every action we take in the business. So, for example, one of the areas that we advise on is philanthropy,
Mm-hmm.
helping people give away their money and achieve their goals, philanthropically speaking. Not a very profitable venture. We end up giving a lot of our time and expertise away, and ultimately our clients end up giving some of their money away. So our reasons for doing that are values-led, not financially led.
Mm. Uh, yeah, because a lot of people would think about philanthropy and say, well, that's what these hugely successful media moguls and mining moguls and so on who've got, hundreds, if not billions of dollars, and they can do that. But for us mere mortals, perhaps there's not a lot of attention put on philanthropy. And yet, coming back to your 8 factors of well-being, philanthropy and generosity, I imagine, underpin a fair bit of that.
It's one of the 8 aspects. You're right about the attitude. We actually did some research with QUT a while back now, and this was a first of its kind. It was in person, it was one-on-one interviews, investing a lot of time, and the target group for that research was people with $5 million or more.
Okay.
So I think most Australians would look at families like that and say, well, they're rich. So we asked a lot of questions about philanthropy, and the overriding response to philanthropy was, well, that's not something for us. That's something that really rich people do.
Mm.
So it seems like that attitude, Richard, permeates no matter where you are in terms of your own means. The truth is, philanthropy can be undertaken by anyone, and it's really about doing what you can where you are with what you have. And I think I've just stolen quote there from Roosevelt many years ago. Not exactly, but it was along those lines. And what I've found in my wellbeing philosophy is that being generous, being philanthropic can actually have a significantly profound impact on our own success and on our own well-being. That's shown up for me. It's shown up in a lot of good quality studies. And remarkably, it's shown up when I've witnessed clients in their giving. One of the surprises, which I'll share with you, is that for a lot of our clients who have given large amounts of money away, often through things like a family foundation, some years later, they're in a better financial position than they were prior to giving the money away. Now, I don't know how that works, but somehow what goes around comes around.
Yeah, look, we could have very sort of deep philosophical conversation around that because, that was the original idea of tithing, that you would give 10% of your income away. It became a religious thing, but it was more, it's almost as if you're saying to the universe, I can afford to be generous because I'm prosperous. And therefore, you're rewarded. And as you say, we're getting to kind of woo-woo stuff here, but, it's almost as if you're saying, look, I don't need to hold on to my wealth because I know that I'll always have more than enough. And it's interesting you talk about that because there's this fantastic Jesuit priest, his name was Anthony DeMello, and he wrote this amazing book called Awareness. And he talks a lot about the fact that when you are being philanthropic, you're actually being selfish because you're doing it because it makes you feel good. And so, this people who take this, look at me, I'm a martyr because I'm doing all of these things for my church or my community or my family and so on and so forth. Well, you're doing it because what you're actually doing makes you feel good about yourself.
Ultimately, it's a selfish endeavour. I actually agree with that. And I think we should embrace it. I think we should recognise that it is very rewarding, it's very fulfilling, it contributes positively to our well-being and our state of happiness. So again, coming back to my approach, I plan that in to my year.
Yeah. So I want to turn this kind of into a recruitment discussion because you are very upfront in terms of these are our values and, this is our stance on well-being and philanthropy. And so how does that translate into you as a business owner building a team? Because I imagine that part of your recruitment process is feeling really confident that the people that you're bringing in, truly share and take on the values of the organisation.
Yeah, good observation. We hire for fit, we train for skill. So our recruitment process actually looks a lot like our client onboarding process. So
Right.
in the same way as I described with the financial roadmap for a new client, we have a similar tool called the success roadmap when we're having a first interview with a potential candidate.
Okay.
And it's a similar question up front. It's what's important about success to you. But essentially what we're doing once more is facilitating a values conversation. We'll identify some personal goals. Now, they don't have to be financial goals. They could be career goals. And lastly, we don't benchmark where they are now financially. We benchmark where they are now in terms of their present state of well-being as compared to where they want to be. So it's a similar process, but that whole first interview is all about values discovery and understanding whether they're a good fit. If they and we decide there's a good fit, then we'll go to a second interview, which probably resembles a bit more of your traditional interview. We might talk about skill and experience and qualifications at the second interview. So, I hope, we're not perfect at this because recruitment is not a science. There's a bit of an art to it. But, generally we're pretty successful at recruiting people that fit in well here. And if you don't mind me saying, Richard, one of the things I'm most proud of in recent years is the fact that we are certified as a great place to work. And in the last 3 years have been ranked as a best workplace in Australia. So for all of those involved in recruitment and managing teams and trying to, aspiring to create a great culture and knowing how hard that is and how long it took us, it's probably the thing I'm most proud of in our business recently.
It's great to get some peer recognition for, exemplary things that you do, and I mean, it must make you very proud because at the end of the day, having a business and having a team, it's very much it's like your extended family, and to know that you're being viewed as somebody who does that better than most, it must be a very rewarding feeling.
Yeah, and I think there's a good correlation between how difficult something is and the sense of achievement you feel at the end when you accomplish that. So I can tell you the Great Place to Work was a very, very long time in the making.
And so what was involved in that then?
Firstly, I think aspiring to it. I think first of all, creating the vision and having the goal to be a great place to work was probably where it started. Without that, we would never have had the persistence and maybe even the resilience to keep going. But it's doing all the things that we talk about. It's having clear values, involving the team in discussing and documenting what the behaviours look like that match those values, having an annual strategic planning cadence that everybody is a part of, a day away. Here's something like if I think about, we're probably halfway through our journey and we're constantly taking pulse checks, getting staff surveys on how we're tracking against Great Place to Work. And James and I were going, for some reason, we're trying to get to 95% or more. And here we were around the 80 to 85, which was good. It just wasn't great. We're working at it. We're opening up, an open book in terms of management, sharing directors' reports with the team so they had full visibility. We're doing all the things that we thought were important. And I made the comment that, it's a bit like when you're cooking up a recipe. You got all the ingredients right. The recipe calls for salt, but you add sugar. It looks exactly the same. You throw it in there, but the meal turns out tasting terribly. So, for us, it was just that one ingredient that we couldn't quite work out. Something that was a big turning point for us was we did an exercise. Remember Shark Tank?
Yeah.
So we put it to the team. We said, look, split up into 3 teams, go away, give us some ideas on what you think we need to do from here to make it a truly great place to work. The 3 teams presented back to us. We had a judging panel. They had a lot of fun with it. We really enjoyed it. But I think most importantly, there was probably about a dozen ideas generated. I think we implemented 11 out of 12.
Right.
Most of them. And I reckon that, along with a couple of other things, probably took us that last little bit of the way.
Yeah. And I also imagine that some of the things might have been surprising to you. Certainly when I've done this in my business in the past, the things that I've thought of what my team really want are actually not what they want at all, or they sort of value other things far more highly than that.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'll give you a couple of examples. So one was, our office does not work from home.
Right.
Now, the team wants some flexibility with their work hours, and they want some flexibility to spend maybe a day at home to meet the tradie or to visit a doctor. But actually working from an office has been an important part of that social connection. So that was one example. So flexibility, but not necessarily working from home, was an example. Another one was wanting access to professional support, emotional support, counselling support. So we've put in place an employee assistance program that the company pays for. I know a lot of businesses do that, but up until that point, it wasn't something that was on our radar.
Yeah. Yeah, once again, I suppose a little bit like that corporate philanthropy, there's this view EAP is really for the BHPs and the massive companies, small to medium enterprise. You should know your staff well enough to have a good finger on the pulse of their mental health. But those kind of services are so valued, aren't they?
So valued. And really, it's taken some conversations off my plate and James's plate that, in hindsight, we probably shouldn't have been having.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, look, we've spoken a lot about your philosophy of business and the organisation and so on. But, talk to us just to sort of close out the conversation. What are you doing in some of the other areas of your on your wheel of well-being to keep the petrol tank full and keep you excited about work and life?
Well, on the recreation side, my next big trip, I like to do a bit of four-wheel drive touring with friends. So end of August, I'll be doing a trip that I haven't done yet, which is heading up to Cape York.
Right.
So my wife, who's not quite as enthusiastic about the four driving, will be going as far as Port Douglas,
Okay.
but staying there. And then I and my friends will kick on and we'll do a tour of Cape York. So that's probably the next one. That's end of August, and we'll be away for a couple of weeks. In terms of the generosity side, I'll share this one with you because I like the work that they do. They support an organisation called Opportunity International. They do a fabulous job of funding people out of poverty, not by giving them a handout, but rather by giving them small loans that help them grow a business. They ultimately repay those loans and the money can be recycled to help others. So that's how I'm doing my sort of fulfilling the majority of my generosity piece at the moment. And in terms of the physical health, Richard, you know that I've recently accomplished a goal that I had, which was to run a sub 20-minute 5 kilometre.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to have ticked that one off just recently.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I did a boys' trip, four-wheel drive trip up to Cape York about 3 years ago, and I can highly recommend it. You can have a lot of fun.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, look, Brad, really appreciate your time today. Very interesting and insightful conversation. Is there anything you wanted to add before we wrap it up?
Only to say, well done to you. I've got to admire your consistency and persistence with this podcast. What are you up to? It's over 200 now,
Yeah,
isn't it?
I'd be circa 250 now.
How long have you been doing it?
Look, I've probably started doing it maybe 5 years or so ago. And I was trying to consistently put out at least an episode a week. And then what I found, which has been really fantastic for us, is if we're recruiting for an organisation, I'll often put the CEO or the owner of the business or the chair on to talk about the company. And then when we go out to headhunt, we use it as an attraction tool because we say to the candidates, look, if you want to get a feel for your future boss, have a listen. And so it became a little bit more centric towards that, and the frequency died off. But I've just reinvigorated it now and moving to this video format too, which I think's fun. But look, I look at Joe Rogan, for example, who sold his podcast rights to Spotify for $250 million. And I have such an incredible admiration for that. This is my own tiny little... but, I just love talking to people. I love hearing interesting stories and interesting perspectives. And it's another way to connect with people like you, which I find really valuable.
Yeah, great conversation, but well done on your consistency and persistence with it. Again, when I think about all those clients who have been successful that I've had the good fortune of working with, I think that's something that shines through all of them. In life, we have a tendency to stop and start things that are important. It's the people that are consistent and persistent that usually succeed. So well done.
What do we say? Success is boring.
Isn't it?
Yeah. And on that
Success
note,
is
Brad,
hard work too.
have a fantastic afternoon.
Yep. See you, Richard.
Bye.